Thank you for joining this webinar on coordinated entry for Minnesota Housing PSH projects. My name is Matt White, and I'm going to be walking you through the information today. Let's start with the definition of coordinated entry. Coordinated entry is a new requirement that's established by HUD, and it essentially provides a centralized or a coordinated process for accessing homeless services and housing. The idea is that individuals who are experiencing a housing crisis will be better served by aligning and coordinating all of the resources in the community by providing a comprehensive assessment of the participant and then making a intentional referral to only those projects that are well aligned or a good fit for the participant's needs. This slide represents a graphic representation of what a aspirational coordinated entry system might look like. The blue boxes represent continuum of care program components. In this situation, coordinated entry represents the entry point or the front door into the crisis response system. Participants who are experiencing homelessness gain access through coordinated entry, receive a comprehensive assessment, and then based on that assessment, they're connected to the continuum of care component that's a good fit for their needs. In many instances, this will be temporary shelter, but it could be rapid rehousing or a combination of emergency shelter and rapid rehousing or other service and housing supports. The yellow section on the far right represents housing, permanent housing, the ultimate goal for all persons who are experiencing homelessness. The housing in our chart is comprised of both community-based permanent housing, which includes market rate and some subsidized housing, and also other kinds of housing that is community-based or permanent supportive housing funded by HUD. The goal with coordinated entry is that participants will experience homelessness only rarely, but when they do, the period of time will be brief and they'll be able to access permanent housing quickly and hopefully not return to homelessness. Let's talk about some of the goals of coordinated entry. The intention is that we design a client-centered approach, and this focuses on engagement and assessment and prioritization so that clients who are experiencing a housing crisis don't have to navigate the complex system of programs and services independently, that we're doing that coordination part on their behalf, that a participant who's experiencing homelessness will be prioritized in the order of their vulnerability or their need, so that persons who have high need and are at the greatest vulnerability are directed to those interventions and those housing supports that are best aligned with addressing their needs. Another goal of coordinated entry is that we eliminate barriers to housing opportunities. Projects that have historically required sobriety or income or other kinds of enrollment considerations, we're asking through coordinated entry that they relax or that they eliminate some of those so that persons with the greatest need are actually able to access the housing and services that are designed for them. We want to foster transparent decision-making so that not only participants or clients themselves, but housing providers also understand how decisions are being made, how participants are being assessed and referred, and the priority order for enrollment in projects. We'll use the coordinated entry process to understand how effective or efficient the system is, and then continuously work to improve our efficiency and our effectiveness so that we can make decisions in a data-based way and comply with the HUD mandate. All CFC-funded and ESG-funded Emergency Solutions Grant projects are required to participate in the new coordinated entry system. Coordinated entry includes 4 core components. Each of these plays an important operational role. We'll talk about each of them separately. Access refers to the front door, the way into the crisis response system. Access could be a project or a shelter, or it could be remote, like 211 or some other crisis hotline. The second component is assessment. This refers to the process of collecting information about a participant's needs and their preferences, and then using that information in step 3 to prioritize persons based on the greatest need and most vulnerability. The fourth component is a direct connection to the housing and supports that a participant needs to resolve their housing crisis, and this is the referral component. The state of Minnesota has adopted a coordinated approach to coordinated entry. Even though each independent continuum of care is operating their own coordinated entry approach independently, the state of Minnesota has defined a core set of operational considerations so that there's uniformity and consistency in the way in which coordinated entry works, regardless of the jurisdiction, the county, or the city that you're in. This helps participants navigate complex systems of care, and it helps housing providers understand how coordinated entry is going to work. There's going to be consistency in the way in which these operational standards are implemented. Let's talk a little bit more about each of these core components, starting with access and assessment. The thing to understand about access is that there might be multiple access points or front doors into the crisis response system, and these could be organized around different subpopulations. HUD allows separate access points for households with children, these are families, households without children, single adults, unaccompanied youth, these are persons aged up to 18, households who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, and homelessness prevention. Each one of those different subpopulations might access the crisis response system through a different set of providers, a different set of programs, or a different set of hotlines or 211 functions. The second component is standardized assessment. The standardized assessment can happen immediately upon the person's engagement with one of the access points. And it's a common set of questions that help the housing provider to understand the housing history of the participant, their demographic information, and risks and adverse outcomes associated with continued homelessness. Each participant receives a score based on their assessment, and that score supports the third component, which is prioritization. All participants in the coordinated entry system or the coordinated entry jurisdiction will be prioritized in a centralized way. This means that all participants will receive a score, and that score then aligns with a project type or housing provider, and they comply with a set of written standards for how these prioritization decisions are going to be made. Persons will be listed in rank order. At the top of the list will be the persons with the most severe service needs or the levels of vulnerability. Those persons will be served first. They'll be referred first to all of the housing and service options available in the continuum of care. We'll make sure that the prioritization scoring process and the prioritization order is publicly available, so both clients themselves and housing providers understand how decisions are being made and how persons are being prioritized for limited housing and service slots. Each continuum of care will adopt a centralized prioritization list, and this essentially means that housing providers no longer will maintain separate waiting lists for their projects. Housing providers will now take referrals from the centralized list managed by the continuum of care. If you have an existing waiting list associated with referrals to your project, we're asking that you work with your continuum of care coordinator to integrate that existing wait list with the continuum of care's centralized wait list through coordinated entry. In the referral process, you'll be provided with referrals that match the housing supports and services available at your program, and also a pre-screening of eligibility criteria that you've already provided to the coordinated entry system. We're asking that you provide information about anticipated openings in your project in advance so that the referrals that you get are well matched with those openings, and that you're only getting referrals that pass or align with those eligibility criteria that you have previously communicated to your coordinated entry coordinator. Through coordinated entry, we'll determine a prospective tenant's potential eligibility, and we'll collect some of the initial pieces of eligibility documentation but the individual housing providers will make final eligibility determination and be responsible for maintaining all eligibility documentation at each individual housing project. We're encouraging each housing provider to learn about the specific coordinated entry process in your community. The CFC coordinator is going to be a great resource to ask questions, to ask for documentation or written materials that describe policies or referral protocols and describe the process for how the centralized prioritization list is going to be managed. You'll use that communication protocol to share program eligibility criteria and any screening guidelines for your project. The coordinated entry system will incorporate those eligibility and screening guidelines into the coordinated assessment so that you're only getting referrals that are well matched with your housing project. You'll be part of the communication plan that identifies opportunities for case conferencing or evaluation so that if there are questions or discrepancies around referrals that you get, you'll have an opportunity to participate in some solution-oriented feedback to help resolve those questions. We hope that coordinated entry is a positive experience for all of the housing providers in Minnesota. If you have questions, we encourage you to contact your CFC coordinator and hope that coordinated entry represents a set of efficiencies that benefit your project and benefit your housing program.